This is a podcast about a college athlete and a guy that definitely would not have talked to her in college. Now they get paid to talk to each other broadcasting basketball games, although they don't get paid to do this podcast yet.
All right, back from hiatus. We are socially distant. I have my mask. This is the athlete and the guy. My name is Joel.
I'm Megan. I'm the athlete.
I can take this off inside, right?
Yeah, you're allowed to. You're the only one in your apartment, last I checked.
That's true, because I didn't talk to any girls when I was in college.
The fact that you were able to troll yourself is really your most redeeming characteristic about yourself.
We named the show that, so I have to kind of roll with it at this point.
And what people don't realize is you named the show that. I was just like, okay, sounds good to me. I sound great.
Listen, cell phone, that's what I'm here for.
There we go. Love it. Well, I'm glad you're wearing your mask because some people aren't. And
No.
I have really enjoyed the masks that I have now. I have probably like 6 or 7 of them. But you know, some people have said it's a political statement. Some people don't care to wear them, but I personally like wearing them because nobody has told me to smile in a long time, which is really nice. And it's so great when you're in the stores and you can like get away with not wearing makeup. You can get away with just so many things. It's a thing about masks. We really should be embracing this as opposed to hating on it.
Yeah. I like, though, that we went from, like, wear a mask, it's good to help people's health. And people are like, no. And, like, wear a mask, it could allow us to have football. And then people are like, oh, well, then, okay.
Right, exactly. That's how it works.
Those are the important things. I got to be honest, though. I have no inside information. I'm curious your opinion here off the top. I don't feel good at this point when it comes to sports.
I think your feeling not good is probably right on for the par right now. I don't feel good either. I don't think we're going to have football. I don't think we're going to have any sports for the rest of 2020. I don't think that basketball season will start when it's supposed to. I'm not confident the NBA is going to finish. I'm not confident that the WNBA is going to finish. I have zero faith right now that we will have any sports from here on out through 2020.
Well, with that cheery subject line, let's get right to it because TBT, the $1 Million Basketball Tournament, is going on as we tape this episode. It is in a bubble. Matt Martucci was around said bubble as one of the play-by-play voices on ESPN. Little TBT, we're joined by one of the TBT's play-by-play voices. He is Matt Martucci. I feel like I shortchange you when I say that, though. So TBT, St. Joe's, Stadium, what am I missing?
Lion fight, I guess, if you
That's
wanted
right.
to add mixed martial arts in there, and powerlifting. I think that about covers it all.
Right,
And the occasional ESPN game. So yeah, I think that takes care of it.
That's good. All right, we hit them all.
Jack of all trades, master of none.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, I mean, pick one. Be a master of one.
Yeah, I don't know. I guess we could call basketball is probably what I've done the most of. So.
Touche. Let's talk a little hoops. You were not in the bubble for TBT. You broadcast out of the broadcast center in Indianapolis. But describe for us what you became acquainted with as far as the bubble that those guys have been in and had to go through.
Sure. I mean, it started with them taking COVID-19 tests before they even left. They just to even get themselves into the bubble, they had to take one. And then I think if I have the protocol correctly, it was day 1, day 3, day 4, and day 5. And day 5, I believe, would be the day of their first game. And then you win one, and then you would have to take another one on day 7. So like 2 days after, the next time you would play, basically into the next round. So yeah, fully quarantined bubble. Once you enter the bubble, the only time you come out is to actually play your game. They do what's called the march or the walk from like a block and a half, 2 blocks down the street from Nationwide Arena, from the Hyatt, which is the TBT Hotel in Columbus, and then into the arena. And then you play, you leave, you walk back over. You don't go anywhere else. You go back into the hotel and you're into the bubble again until you play again.
How'd they feel about it?
As far as I could tell, talking to GMs and to players and just people that set this stuff up for their respective teams, they were, for the most part, enjoying it because of the fact that basketball was back. Your options are limited as to what you could do. I know there were a lot of guys playing like Call of Duty and, playing 2K and all that stuff. At one point, it was the Tuesday before the tournament started. So the tournament started Saturday on the 4th of July. a lot of those guys were there like Monday or Tuesday, the guys that were playing in the first round, and they ended up taking down the hotel internet because there were so many guys like logged in on a network trying to play either Call of Duty or 2K that like the Wi-Fi ended up either crashing or like coming to just a complete halt. So yeah, there wasn't, in terms of options, there wasn't a ton that they could do other than practice. There were multiple practice courts that they had set up. Some of those surfaces, from what I was told by some of the guys, some of them like were better than others. The one that you would see with the Ohio State logo, they would call it the Ohio State court. That one was supposedly the best one. One or two of the others were a little slicker, I think, than some of the guys would have liked. But yeah, limited options in terms of what they could do. But I think for the most part, they were just happy to be playing again, happy to have basketball back.
One of the biggest issues I have had with this concept of the bubble, whether it be for the TBT tournament, the NBA, the WNBA, all these leagues trying to come back, I don't know how feasible and realistic it is from the standpoint of how many people you are expecting to keep COVID free and are expected to stay inside of the bubble. How feasible it's worked though for this TBT tournament, right? So my question is, how likely is it to translate over to the NBA or WNBA, where you not only have the players and coaches, but you're also dealing with team staff and personnel? So that you have a whole other group of people that you have to worry about, more numbers.
Yeah, and that's a great question, Megan. I think it's going to depend on the first thing. Your first question has to be, what kind of security measures are going to be in place for the NBA bubble? And off the top of my head, just seeing like certain things I've read, I don't have like a concrete answer as to how they're going to do that. But what I can tell you is TBT had full-blown security guards. They had people monitoring when, if somebody tried to leave, you're not coming back in. So that was one thing. The other thing was they set a principle and kind of set a standard early on before people even got there that if you had one positive case on your team, the whole team was going home. That was it. So they ended up having to have 4 teams on reserve. There were 24 teams in the field, 4 reserve teams. They ended up using all 4 of those reserve teams. And then even of the teams that ended up with the 8 buys, the top 8 seeds, one of those in Eberline Drive, and I know it broke their heart to have to send them home because they're a TBT staple. They ended up having a positive case. So they were gone. They ended up having to go home. So they kind of laid down the law, I think, very early on before teams even got there, that if you knew you were going and you knew you were going to be accepted, this is how we're laying down the rules. This is how we're going to enforce them. And, if you don't like it, it's probably not a good idea to show up in the first place because you're going to go home early.
What was the process like of sending teams home? And like when Eberline Drive gets booted, what is that like for them? What's the reaction from other teams? How did that all go down?
So imagine if you're playing in a tournament game, Joel. Either one of you and Megan. Megan, I know you've got experience with that too.
Megan played in more tournaments than
Yeah, well, yeah. You broadcast one yet? We're getting there. You might have been on your way this year, maybe. They were having a pretty good year. Anyway, so imagine either playing or broadcasting a tournament game and being with one of the teams, and the morning of the day that you play, they take everybody's bags and they will either move them outside the hotel or they move them, to like an exit hotel, or they move them onto the bus or wherever it happens to be. Either way, they do that for both teams with the idea that if you lose, you're going to get transitioned to what is their exit hotel. In terms of with the case, of like Eberline Drive, I didn't get full details on exactly how that worked, how they handled that. I would assume that they had probably isolated the person or sent them home, in advance of everybody else. That person, they paid for their transportation home, or they quarantined wherever they designated them that they had to quarantine for whatever set period of time. And then everybody else would move to likely the exit hotel. And then, you take your respective flights or your transportation home the next day. But if you lost that day, you move right over to the hotel, another hotel separate from the Hyatt, and then you're done. So
just kick
every day is like, talk about the most motivating factor in the world, like to win games. It's like, yeah, I don't have to go to the exit hotel today.
Keep it the Hyatt another day. I get room service. Yes.
I have to leave the safe hotel.
Yes. Like, it's like, I'm still in the bubble. Yes.
It's exciting from that standpoint. Something a lot of people probably don't consider when it comes to bringing back leagues, especially like a tournament like the TBT tournament. You have broadcasters also that you have to show up to put on the tournament. You are one of them. You do not live in Indianapolis. You traveled there to call this. What was that experience for you?
Well, I hadn't flown since March 8th. So that was the last flight. I think I had done an 8-10 game. I'd done St. Louis and St. Bonaventure on a Saturday night, and then I flew to do the CAA quarterfinals the next day, what ended up being in DC. So March 8th, March 9th was the last time I had flown before July 2nd. So we were coming up on close to 4 months. So other than like hearing experiences that others had, my older brother works in sales, and with my family being up here between North Carolina and New Jersey, he was back and forth a couple of times for various reasons. But hearing experiences like that was basically all I had to go by. So my first flight, I got up, I think at like 4 a.m. It was like a 6 a.m. flight. Get on the flight. Everybody in the airport, everybody's designated, wearing masks. They announced during the flight, if you take it off, the only time you can take it off is to either eat some food or take a drink. They're not having beverage services on the plane, unless, I think maybe if you wanted like a glass of water in first class, they would probably get you some water. But everybody else, for the most part, was pretty much denied those privileges. So it was a little weird. I had one guy across the way from me, like across the aisle, doing the whole like half mask thing, like pulled up to this point, which at this point you might as well just take the whole damn thing off, because you're not helping anybody. You're not helping yourself. You're hurting everybody. So that happened on the way out. The way back, the flight was packed. I had ended up in first class on the way back, so I ended up getting a glass of water. So that was
get that glass. There you go. You got the glass of water.
I got those special privileges.
What was doing the game like?
What's that?
What was doing the game like? Because you were like, where were you and Tim were in the same room?
So yeah, Tim Scarborough and I were in the same room. So I would say, like, I have to kind of give you a vantage point. So maybe I'll turn my laptop around. So if I'm here and I turn my laptop around real quick and you can see that painting, like, or that picture out there, I would say Tim and I were probably that distance from each other. So we were, I would say, probably a little more than 6 feet. I would always, when I'd introduce him, I would say Matt Martucci and a socially distanced Tim Scarborough. They would have us just like this, boxed up on the screen side by side. So I would be on one side of the room and I would turn usually to my right shoulder. And you would almost have to do like a quick turn, because otherwise it would make it look like, and one of our producers told me this, it would make it look like you were looking at the wrong camera or you didn't know which camera to look at. Mm-hmm. And I was like, I'm trying to be conversational here and gesture to my partner, and I'm looking like a moron on TV. So that was kind of difficult. That was one of the challenges. Jen Hale was in Columbus while the two of us were in Indy. So that was a little bit different. We had one monitor to our left that had like basically all 6 cameras. You had a monitor to your right with you, the two of you have both done TV games, with program feed with what was going on the floor. And then, yeah, he had the same setup on the right-hand side. I had that set up, and your producer was in your ear. My producer, I did not see. I have worked with both of them before in person. Rob Reichley and Damon Lewis, I did not see either of them, even though we were in the same building when we were in Indy. So there were 4 of us at some, and maybe at points, maybe 5 or 6, because there were Chris Vosters and Dan Dockich would be back in the prep room, which was, again, totally separate from where we were. We could get to them if we needed to like talk about basketball or whatever. But yeah, there were only like 4 to 6 of us in, I don't even know, probably a 2,000 square foot space, maybe a little bigger, a little smaller, give or take, a few hundred square feet. But yeah, it was interesting. It was different. but we made it work. Two of us, a stat guy, our liaison, the lead engineer, and one of the founders of Tupelo Raycom, John Lucy, and Mike Burks, who was our executive producer or our coordinating producer. So it was like the five and six of us, pretty much.
Did the stat guy like throw it at you? Like, was he socially distant? And it was just like, here.
He'd stand up every now and then with like a massive dry erase board. That's pretty much how he did it. And picture this, in between the two of us, I would say probably like a 42-inch monitor with the stat broadcast up.
Oh, cool.
You look up every now and then. And I mean, I had it on my laptop or my iPad or whatever I was using that particular day. But they had it up big so we could see it.
And from your standpoint, you've done hundreds of college basketball games calling in your day. How difficult was it to have that type of setup to do a game? Because Joel and I do games together all the time. And I mean, we're constantly just like tapping each other, motion change. Like there's a lot of chemistry that you get being right next to each other. How difficult was it to create that when you're it's a challenge. It has to be.
Yeah, I think, Megan, it would be a lot more of one if I were working with anybody but Tim Scarborough. Scar and I go back to 2016. We randomly did a Conference USA tournament game together, and we just clicked. I think we did 2 that night, and I can't even tell you how many that I've done with him. And then when he and I were getting started in TBT, we did the Philly Jamboree the first year in 2017, and they paired us together pretty much every year since then. So he and I have worked together now for the better part of like close to 5 years. So I don't necessarily need to be next to him in that case to be on the same page. Now, if it were anybody else, like if it were Dan Dockich or Frischilla or, Fran or Seth Greenberg, I think it would have been a big time challenge. Props big time to Chris Vosters, who has worked with Seth Greenberg half a dozen times at this point, but I don't think he's ever done a game with a partner where he was there in Indy, Seth was in Bristol, Jen Hale was in Columbus. So that's just crazy to me. And I mean, I'm sure I would have been able to do it, but they made it, and this is a testament to our production crew as well, they made it damn near seamless. You never would have known unless they told you, at least I think.
Tooch, one thing unrelated to TBT here on the back end of this, and that is you are a Philly guy. So I want to ask you one of our other bullet points that we're going to talk about. What's going on with DeSean Jackson?
Can I say no comment? That was, wow. I did not plan to wake up and go on Instagram and see that. I'm going to chalk that one up to straight ignorance and not completely even knowing what he was. I'm sure he had some semblance of an idea of what he was posting, but I don't have a good explanation. You want my thoughts on it in terms of how they should approach it?
How's Philly feeling right now?
I would assume, and I haven't listened to a ton of sports radio, having 2 little ones running around at home. There are a lot of people that probably aren't all that happy. I would say half the community is probably somewhere between not empathy, but more saying they get the ignorance of the comment more than anything, and him not understanding what he was saying. And then, so there's kind of a middle ground between that and people who are just straight pissed off, I would say. I wish I had a better answer than what I have given you there. But if you look at their precedent that they set, granted it was a long time ago when social justice and where we've come as a nation with all the protests and with people, speaking their mind, I think a lot more. And I think it's a good thing and a lot clearer than people have in the past. They set the precedent when they didn't cut Riley Cooper for coming out and dropping the N-word at that country concert. If they were going to do it then, they probably should have cut Riley Cooper. Instead, they gave him a slap on the wrist and more or less made him made him, get sensitivity training and things like that. And I think they're hopefully, based on their statement and the NFL statement, they're going to do the same thing with DeSean Jackson if they choose to let him stick around. And I thought Julian Edelman's post, I thought was great. I thought, I think that's the best way. I've spent a minimal amount of time with DeSean Jackson, just through radio station appearances and stuff like that. I would not classify DeSean Jackson as somebody who I would think as being anti-Semitic. I would think he's just misguided and ignorant to what he said. And in that case, probably needs some education. And who better than somebody like Julian Edelman, who identified, his own personal situation and said, you know what, I wasn't all that passionate about Judaism and about my own personal faith until later. And then when I actually understood, then I went and did it. I got myself educated and I realized, what a big deal it was and how much it affected me when people said things that were considered anti-Semitic. I think you've known me long enough, Joel. There's no place for it. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what religion, race, sexual orientation. I don't care if we're black, brown, white, yellow, clear. You don't mess with people when it comes to that. You don't insult people based on how you carry yourself or how you self-identify. It's just not. There's no place for it in 2020.
Tooch, thanks, buddy. Good to see you.
Good to see you both.
You think football is still fun?
Zero fun, sir.
Basically, I like outdoor sports, but indoor sports have their place too.
All right, Meghan, TBT happens in a bubble. So too will the NBA and WNBA. They are off to great starts with both of those sports. We have gotten many Instagram posts of the meals from the NBA, and this is Kayla Johnson from the WNBA on Twitter. Just got this video from one of the laundry rooms inside the bubble and couldn't be more disturbed. This is not okay. I'm not going to click play, but I'm just going to assume it's not good.
So when I watched that video, there's a mouse trap on top of like a shelf. And I don't understand how mice get up there.
Oh, they do.
That's terrifying, first and foremost. That was just a small side note that I noticed regarding that video. However, the NBA players, when they get to Orlando, have a mandatory 48-hour quarantine before going into the bubble. So during that quarantine, they had food delivered to their rooms. And the food is glorified airplane food, Joel. It looked disgusting. Like,
airplane food
when like the little rolls they like put in like the plastic wrap, like when you're flying international, looks disgusting. These are some of the highest paid athletes in the world eating low grade dog food in this bubble as they prepare to try to finish the season amidst, that's a hard word, during this pandemic.
They did have baked potato chips though.
Thank goodness, because I'm sure that was their biggest concern. I did see some Stacy's pita chips as well.
And they can't leave. Like they can't go get takeout.
No, they can't order anything. So after this, the NBA put out a statement that the food would be much better because the team was given a chef who works at Disney. But here's my thing. I have zero confidence that this bubble is going to work. There are too many moving parts that all have to obey the rules. And you cannot convince me that every single person in the organization, because we're also talking health staff and personnel, security guards, chefs making foods. Chefs have to stay in the bubble. They can't leave. Every single person who is inside this bubble has to follow the rules for 3 months. I am not convinced. People won't even wear masks in the United States, let alone you're telling me you're going to get this whole group of people to follow the rules for 3 straight months? It's not going to happen. Absolutely not. I have zero faith in it.
Which is where the next piece of our conversation comes in, because Meghan, how are we going to have college sports? Because you have the NBA and the WNBA, which are collectively bargained, and those players have like the ability to legally defend their rights and ask for things and hold out and all that stuff. College athletes don't have that. If they have a season, like they can't, I guess they could. We haven't really gotten to that point. Say like, I don't want to play because I don't feel right about it. But how are we going to have college sports if we're going to struggle with bubbles on the pro side? Because there's no college bubble. Like, you're on campus. You're going to class. You're going to dining halls. The guy sitting next to you in econ was definitely at the bar last night. I'd love to see it, and my fingers are crossed, but I don't know. Would you, as a student athlete, like, put yourself back in 21-year-old Meghan McEwen's body? Mm-hmm. If I told you that we're in the midst of a global pandemic, here's the situation. If you want to play, we can play, but you have to go to class online in your dorm room with Maggie Lyon, and the two of you have to be together at all times. You get your meals together, you study together, you go to practice in the same car. Like, that's your life, but it means you can play. How well do you think you would have adhered to it and the rest of your team would have adhered to it? And would that have been the only way?
I am not confident that everybody on our team would have adhered to that. I'm not confident I would have adhered to that. I would have probably gone and been tempted to go hang out with my boyfriend, who was another athlete. And that opens up a whole new can of worms, because athletes are friends with each other. They're dating each other. They're going to try to see each other. It's so unrealistic to expect these students to stay disciplined enough to stay within the bubble. At the same point, I am very afraid of it. I don't want to get the coronavirus.
No.
I think that it's not the flu. Any person you talk to who has had the coronavirus and survived it tell you that this is horrible. Spoke to a man the other day who had it back in March, said he felt like there was an 80-pound bag of sand on his chest. And people aren't getting the virus, and it doesn't last just 2 weeks. Sometimes it lasts a couple of days. Sometimes it lasts 4 months. We don't know enough about it. There's not enough information out there. This is a whole new ball game, and you're bargaining with student athletes' lives here. So it's going to come down to this. As leaders, what's more important? Putting money in your pocket or keeping your student athletes alive and healthy? That's the decision that people are going to have to make. And I really hope they choose the latter.
What is interesting is, like, in my mind, I've played out the scenarios of, what if we just said no sports till January? And on January 1, like, all right, hard start. Like, basketball is going to go January, February, March, April. March Madness is now in May.
May Madness.
Sports, yeah, right. Fall sports are now spring sports. Football starts in March. Like, can we do that? It's a logistical nightmare. Absolutely. But nothing is really the way we want it to be right now. That, in my mind, makes some semblance of sense, but granted, I'm sure I'm missing a bunch of things here. The issue that then gets raised with that is, how much do you keep punting and kicking cans down the road? And if we get to January and there's still an issue, do we look and go, well, we could have played. Why didn't we try this in September? And now we've hit a second wave and it's even worse.
The problem being, though, right now, Joel, we're still in the first wave.
Right.
There hasn't even been a stoppage in any of this. You take a look at what's happened the last couple of weeks. We're now seeing the results of states opening on Memorial Day weekend. We are seeing a spike. The state of Florida saw an 1,393% increase in cases reported per day.
Is that a lot?
Not a little. It's not a little. South Carolina, 999% spike in cases per day. You want to know something about Florida and South Carolina? They're both in the SEC. Mm-hmm. Texas,
and the AC.
680% rise in cases. Arizona, 858% rise in daily cases reported. You're telling me we're going to have college football? Bye. That's not happening.
Yeah, my fingers are crossed, but
I'm trying to be realistic. And here's the issue when I'm saying all this. I hate this right now. All of us hate this. This is awful. You and I don't have jobs right now.
No.
This is our livelihood here. My father's a college basketball coach. He's not doing anything right now. This is awful. I don't want this to happen, but we have to be realistic here. This isn't happening.
Let's talk about stupid things that people said over the last couple of weeks. We talked about it a little bit with Matt when it comes to what happened in Philadelphia with DeSean Jackson. But before we get to DeSean Jackson, let's talk about the WNBA, because Atlanta Dream co-owner Kelly Loeffler, she is a senator, at least she is for now, She came down on Black Lives Matter in the WNBA, saying that no one asked for politics in sports. No one asked for politics in sports. Just dribble the basketball. That went over like a lead balloon, as it should have. And many players have said, yeah, maybe you shouldn't own a team anymore. Meghan, as a aficionado of women's basketball and someone who has
that. Appreciate that though.
Yeah. Give me the hoedown on your thoughts from the junior senator from Georgia.
The hypocrisy regarding this scenario is hysterical. So we're not going to make this about politics. However, keep in mind, Kelly Loeffler, who got her Senate seat after being put into that position in 2019 by Governor Brian Kemp, who, if you pay attention to anything going on in Georgia with their governor, man doesn't even know how to put on a mask. So keep that in mind. She gets put into this position, the Senate seat. She's running against like 20 other people coming up here in November for the Senate seat, trying to cater to her voters right now. This was a political move first and foremost. Kelly Loeffler is Trump in a wig. This woman is trying to push that agenda and trying to force this on the WNBA. The WNBA, these players are not afraid to speak out. If you remember back to originally Colin Kaepernick's original movement where he knelt during the national anthem, players in the WNBA knelt during the national anthem.
Maya Moore took a whole season off for social justice.
Renee Montgomery, who plays for the Atlanta Dream, is taking a whole season off for social justice. These women are trying to use their platform to better the world, to better social injustices, to be in the forefront of these movements, which is empowering and which is what you're supposed to do with your platform. Kelly Loeffler, who's from Illinois, by the way, wore the number 23 in high school. Do you know why, Joel?
Was she a fan of a black man that played basketball?
She was a fan of a man named Michael Jordan, who last I checked was black. Yeah. Keep that in mind. You cannot, in this day and age, be in any type of ownership position, especially in a league like the WNBA, and tell your players that they should not politicize sports. Because if there's one thing we've learned since 2016, the only thing that has been politicized more than anything is sports. Yeah. And you can thank the man you voted into office for that.
Here's the quote from Senator Loeffler. What I see is politics coming into sports. No one has asked politics to come into sports. Sports are about unifying people. People from all walks of life, from all political views, should be welcomed into sports. So let me take that in and of itself. Number one, this isn't about the politics at play here are black people are people, and you should believe that. If that's if being black is okay, is a divisive issue, then maybe you should look yourself in the mirror and ask some real hard questions. Like, we're not asking, like, racism is bad. I didn't know there were two sides to that issue.
First and foremost, I'd like for you to also keep in mind what NBA owner back in 2013, 2014 lost his job for making racist comments.
Donald Sterling
of the Los Angeles Clippers.
There's also no
irony. Don't be Donald Sterling. And what you just did by saying that they should not support the Black Lives Matters movement, even if you're not racist, how is that not perceived as being racist? Yeah. How is it not?
Well, while we're on the subject of racism, Meghan McEwen, let's divert to another kind of racism. We talked about it with Tooch when he was with us earlier. DeSean Jackson stepped in it this week, and then Stephen Jackson doubled down. He said, let me have more of that you just stepped in, please. I don't even know where to start with this one, but DeSean Jackson, the Philadelphia Eagles wide receiver, came out and, without reiterating what he said, quoted Hitler, which it turned out he didn't actually quote Hitler. It's a falsely attributed quote. And really this could end there, because don't quote Hitler. That's a good place to start. Even if he said something at some point in time that maybe you thought was profound, just take the L and pick another quote. Like, let's just start there.
I feel like a safe bet, quote Gandhi. I mean, like, you're pretty safe with that.
Like, go to Gandhi. Like,
See, you're safe with Mother Teresa.
yes, 100%. But
Okay.
here's my bigger issue, and I tweeted about this at the time, where there were folks that said, don't get it wrong, this is, in part, Judaism in control. And I was like, whoa, hang on a second. Like, we can't combat one form of racism with another form of racism here. There is no great Jewish person somewhere like pulling the strings. And anybody that asserts that is horribly mistaken and falling into every trope that has been perpetrated or perpetuated throughout history, and that led to the Holocaust, and that led to the Spanish Inquisition, and every other persecution of Jews ever has been this idea that the Jews have the power and the Jews have the money. And we live in a society where we just kind of accept some of those tropes. People will joke about the doctor who's a Jew and the lawyer who's a Jew, and like even sometimes in the Jewish community, it'll be like, oh, he's a lawyer. Ha, it's funny, we get it, inside joke, but really it's not, because we all know the reason that your mind thinks that is because that's the trope that people use because you're Jewish. And what bothers me is now I've seen enough of it on social media that it's pervasive enough that it's not just a DeSean Jackson thing. And then Stephen Jackson comes to DeSean's rescue and is talking about, well, he's speaking the truth. I'm like, what do you mean he's speaking the truth?
We're at a point in time in this day and age where we have access to so many different social media platforms. You can't claim ignorance anymore.
Right.
You just can't. We are living in a time. First and foremost, I'd like to start by saying DeSean Jackson, who, as you mentioned, plays for the Philadelphia Eagles, wide receiver. Have you ever heard the phrase, don't bite the hand that feeds you?
Yeah.
Okay. DeSean Jackson plays for a Jewish owner in Jeffrey Lurie, a Jewish general manager in Howie Roseman. So first and foremost, basically the guys who are deciding your paycheck, let's just try not to, ruffle any feathers there. So that's just a little side note I wanted to point out.
Or maybe maybe have a conversation with them before you go quoting Hitler. Maybe go to your GM and go hey, Howie, I've got some thoughts here. I wanted to run this by you. Because I guarantee he would say, DeSean, maybe you shouldn't do that, and maybe we should sit down and have a conversation.
And the issue with him coming up to step up to the plate, he's been so vocal during this Black Lives Matter movement, which has been great. It's been fantastic. Stephen Jackson was friends with George Floyd, and knew him. So he has done so much work, but by saying that, you have almost undone everything that you have been preaching for the last 2 months. That is the biggest flaw in your argument now. And that's how people can now come and attack you. That's how you just undermined yourself. You just undermined all the work you had just done with the BLM movement. And that's really sad, because the Black Lives Matter movement is incredibly important. And it's starting to prove that maybe this isn't just a moment. Maybe it's truly having a profound impact that we will see carry over from here on out. But by having somebody who's a vocal leader in a position of power like Stephen Jackson come out and say, saying the same exact things that he's criticizing other people regarding the Black Lives Matter movement, you can't do that and expect for your impact to still be there.
We have to get to a point where we talk about inclusion for all. And you can't get upset at someone for being racist toward Black people if you then turn around and make racist comments toward Jewish people. Because you are doing to others what is being done unto you, golden rule.
And there is something important when I say you can't claim ignorance anymore. To an extent, you can't. You should know that Hitler is not good. that being said, there are a lot of things that we can learn each day.
Right.
And you might not realize that making a joke about a lawyer being Jewish is offensive. And it's really important to acknowledge that I was ignorant in this case, but have the conversation.
You know, there's a systemic thing that has to happen here too, because when we talked about the Black Lives Matter movement, I did not learn about Juneteenth in high school.
Mm-hmm.
I did not learn about Tulsa in high school. We need to do a better job educating people about those types of things so that we can all have that intelligent conversation together and have a point of understanding. But I can tell you this much. I sure as hell learned who Hitler was. So if Stephen Jackson, and that's not because I'm Jewish, it's because that was a whole semester. World War II, Holocaust, Hitler, didn't like Jews. Like that, we definitely went over that. So if Stephen Jackson is coming out and saying that, like, claiming ignorance, then that's on you, bro. Like, that means you didn't pay attention. You know, I'm not claiming ignorance in that I didn't know Juneteenth. Like, I need to do a better job. I need to know more about those things. But I'm not running around saying anti-Black things and that I was never educated. Like, I know for a fact that wherever Stephen Jackson went to high school, he was in a class where they taught the Holocaust. I know it for a fact. The fact that he doesn't know, that's on him. And we need to do a better job as people listening to each other, but we also need to do a better job holding each other accountable for learning what we're supposed to learn when we're in school. Let's talk about having an open mind, Meghan McEwen. Let's move on to pop culture.
Rise and shine.
You're dead to me, and you are, because I'm out.
And Lee, please accept this rose.
Absolutely, I will.
All right, pop culture this week is kind of a little bit of political culture. Meghan McEwen, there's a third major candidate in the presidential race, and his name is Kanye West. This is from the New York Post. With regard to developing policies, the musician rejected the idea of having policies as potentially restrictive. Quote, I don't know if I would use the word policy for the way I would approach things. I don't have a policy. When I went to Nike and designed Yeezy and went to Louis and designed a Louis Vuitton at the same time. It wasn't a policy, it was a design. We need more to innovate the design to be able to free the mind at this time. He went on to discuss the superhero movie Black Panther and its fictional kingdom of Wakanda, and said he would frame his vision for his administration off the box office blockbuster.
So do we all get cool outfits as citizens of this Kanye West country? Look, I'm just going to say this right now. First and foremost, I saw an article earlier today that Kanye's close family and friends are worried that he's dealing with a bipolar episode.
And that's a serious issue.
Which is a serious issue. So, like, before I would like to preface this by saying, like, Kanye West needs help and, like, he is mentally ill. And this is really sad and scary that he's able to use his platform right now the way he is, because it's clearly not healthy for his family, his poor children that are having to deal with this. But anyone out there who's going to vote for Kanye West because they don't want to vote for Trump, you're essentially voting for Donald Trump by voting for Kanye West. So just keep that in mind. You're taking votes away from the one person that could actually beat him and get him out of office. Something to be kept in mind. I will say this, Kanye West, you're my thoughts and prayers, because mental illness is nothing to make fun of.
Kanye West, great musician. Great musician. Clearly, I enjoy his music. I'm
a Taylor Swift fan through and through. So me and Kanye, I don't listen to his music anymore.
I'm gonna let you finish.
That was funny.
I enjoy his music, and I've hung out with him at a party of sorts when.
Okay, time out. Wait, whoa. Excuse me?
Yeah. So when I was a freshman in college, Kanye performed at Syracuse, and he stayed at the Sheraton Hotel, which was my dorm my freshman year. There was overflow dorm, so they put us in the Sheraton Hotel.
But you in a hotel?
Yeah, so that was our dorm. So in the
You
lobby,
get maid service and room service?
we did on Wednesdays, once a week. But so Kanye, his band, his musicians were in the lobby of the hotel. So our friends just joined them, and like we hung out with them for a night. And like Kanye came down at one point. He was there for like 5 minutes, but that's my story of partying with Kanye West.
Wow. That is really cool. And not many people could say they party with Kanye West.
Right.
All I'm saying is that a man who uses women in the way that he has in his songs just really isn't doing much for anybody. And I'm sure that he would be horrified if any man spoke of his daughters the way that he speaks of women.
Yeah, well, I won't disagree with that.
If I can get on my feminist soapbox for a second, I'm done now.
On another note, from a pop culture standpoint, we talked about Rachel Berry a couple of weeks ago, Lea Michele, Glee. And I brought up the point that Glee is, some people talk about a Glee curse. And there have been a number of tragedies associated with cast members of the show. Corey Monteith, Finn Hudson obviously died of a drug overdose while the show was filming. Mark Salling wound up in jail where he commits suicide, who played Noah Puckerman on the show. In another sad turn from the Glee cast, Naya Rivera, who played Santana Lopez, in a bizarre story, seemingly is presumed to have passed away from a potential drowning incident this week when she and her child, 4-year-old child, went out on a boat. They went swimming together. The child got back on the boat with a life jacket on. Naya Rivera did not. And it's weird because the lake they were in, I guess, has had more than a dozen incidences of drowning in recent years. And Naya Rivera right now is missing. They have a recovery mission on for her at the moment. Best thoughts to her family and everybody as they go forward. Yeah. On that note, Meghan, I'll see you next week.
That was a very uplifting way to end the show.
Sorry, give me an uplifting note here. We went from like sports are never happening and they can't find Santana, and Kanye's ruined 2020. Like,
you know what? To end this on a positive note, I recently became a Pilates teacher, and that's a lot of fun. So that's been what I've been up to in quarantine, really practicing that. So, a little side hustle to have.
Gotta get that core in.
Hold that forearm plank. Go work on it. I'll see you next week.
What?